remained with strained eyes in torments of expectation. "Thank God for a good breakfast," said Squeers when he had finished. "Number one may take a drink." Number one seized the mug ravenously, and had just drunk enough to make him wish for more, when Mr. Squeers gave the signal for number two, who gave up at the same interesting moment to number three, and the process was repeated until the milk and water terminated with number five. "And now," said the schoolmaster, dividing the bread and butter for three into as many portions as there were children, "you'd better look sharp with your breakfast, for the horn will blow in a minute or two, and then every boy leaves off." Permission being thus given to fall to, the boys began to eat voraciously and in desperate haste, while the schoolmaster, who was in high good humour after his meal, picked his teeth with a fork and looked smilingly on. In a very short time the horn was heard. "I thought it wouldn't be long," said Squeers, jumping up and producing a little basket from under the seat. "Put what you haven't had time to eat in here, boys. You'll want it on the road." Nicholas was considerably startled by these very economical arrangements, but he had no time to reflect upon them, for the little boys had to be got up to the top of the coach, and their boxes had to be brought out and put in, and Mr. Squeers's luggage was to be seen carefully deposited in the boot, and all these officers were in his department. He was in the full heat and bustle of concluding these operations, when his uncle, Mr. Ralph Nickleby, accosted him. "Oh, here you are, sir," said Ralph. "Here are your mother and sister, sir." "Where?" cried Nicholas, looking hastily round. "Here," replied his uncle. "Having too much money and nothing at all to do with it, they were paying a hackney coach as I came up, sir." "We were afraid of being too late to see him before he went away from us," said Mrs. Nickleby, embracing her son, heedless of the unconcerned lookers on in the coachyard. "Very good, ma'am," returned Ralph. "You're the best judge, of course. I merely said that you were paying a hackney coach. I never pay a hackney coach, ma'am. I never hire one. I haven't been in a hackney coach of my own hiring for 30 years, and I hope I shan't be for 30 more if I live as long." "I should never have forgiven myself if I had not seen him," said Mrs. Nickleby. "Poor dear boy, going away without his breakfast too, because he feared to distress us." "Mighty fine, certainly," said Ralph, with great testiness. "When I first went to business, ma'am, I took a penny loaf and a ha'porth of milk for my breakfast as I walked to the city every morning. What do you say to that, ma'am? Breakfast! Bah!" "Now, Nickleby," said Squeers, coming up at the moment, buttoning his greatcoat, "I think you'd better get up behind. I'm afraid of one of them boys falling off, and then there's £20 a year gone." "Dear Nicholas," whispered Kate, touching her brother's arm, "who is that vulgar man?" "Eh?" growled Ralph, whose quick ears had caught the inquiry. "Do you wish to be introduced to Mr. Squeers, my dear?" "That the schoolmaster? No, uncle, oh no," replied Kate, shrinking back. "I'm sure I heard you say as much, my dear," retorted Ralph in his cold sarcastic manner. "Mr. Squeers, here's my niece, Nicholas's sister." "Very glad to make your acquaintance, miss," said Squeers, raising his hat an inch or two. "I wish Mrs. Squeers took gals, and we had you for a teacher. I don't know, though, whether she mightn't grow jealous if we had. Ha ha ha!" If the proprietor of Dotheboys Hall could have known what was passing in his assistant's breast at that moment, he would have discovered with some surprise that he was as near being soundly pummelled as he had ever been in his life. Kate Nickleby, having a quicker perception of her brother's emotions, led him gently aside, and thus prevented Mr. Squeers from being impressed with the fact in a peculiarly disagreeable manner. "My dear Nicholas," said the young lady, "who is this man? What kind of place can it be that you are going to?" "I hardly know, Kate," replied Nicholas, pressing his sister's hand. "I suppose the Yorkshire folks are rather rough and uncultivated, that's all." "But this person," urged Kate. "Is my employer, or master, or whatever the proper name may be," replied Nicholas quickly, "and I was an ass to take his coarseness ill. They're looking this way, and it's time I was in my place. Bless you, love, and goodbye. Mother, look forward to our meeting again some day. Uncle, farewell. Thank you heartily for all you have done, and all you mean to do. Quite ready, sir." With these hasty adieus, Nicholas mounted nimbly to his seat, and waved his hand as gallantly as if his heart went with it. At this moment, when the coachman and guard were comparing notes for the last time before starting on the subject of the way-bill, when porters were screwing out the last reluctant sixpences, itinerant newsmen making the last offer of a morning paper, and the horses giving the last impatient rattle to their harness, Nicholas felt somebody pulling softly at his leg. He looked down, and there stood Newman Noggs, who pushed up into his hand a dirty letter. "What's this?" inquired Nicholas. "Hush!" rejoined Noggs, pointing to Mr. Ralph Nickleby, who was saying a few earnest words to Squeers a short distance off. "Take it. Read it. Nobody knows. That's all." "Stop!" cried Nicholas. "No," replied Noggs. Nicholas cried "Stop!" again, but Newman Noggs was gone. A minute's bustle, a banging of the coach doors, a swaying of the vehicle to one side as the heavy coachman and still heavier guard climbed into their seats, a cry of "All right!" a few notes from the horn, a hasty glance of two sorrowful faces below, and the hard features of Mr. Ralph Nickleby, and the coach was gone too, and rattling over the stones of Smithfield. The little boys' legs being too short to admit of their feet resting upon anything as they sat, and the little boys' bodies being consequently in imminent hazard of being jerked off the coach, Nicholas had enough to do over the stones to hold them on. Between the manual exertion and the mental anxiety attendant upon this task, he was not a little relieved when the coach stopped at the Peacock at Islington. He was still more relieved when a hearty-looking gentleman, with a very good-humoured face and a very fresh colour, got up behind and proposed to take the other corner of the seat. "If we put some of these youngsters in the middle," said the newcomer, "they'll be safer in case of their going to sleep, eh?" "If you'll have the goodness, sir," replied Squeers, "that'll be the very thing. Mr. Nickleby, take 3 of them boys between you and the gentleman. Belling and the youngest Snawley can sit between me and the guard." "3 children," said Squeers, explaining to the stranger. "Books as 2. "I have not the least objection, I'm sure," said the fresh-coloured gentleman. "I have a brother who wouldn't object to book his 6 children as 2 at any butcher's or baker's in the kingdom, I dare say. Far from it." "6 children, sir!" exclaimed Squeers. "Yes, and all boys," replied the stranger. "Mr. Nickleby," said Squeers in great haste, "catch hold of that basket. Let me give you a card, sir, of an establishment where those 6 boys can be brought up in an enlightened, liberal, and moral manner, with no mistake at all about it, for 20 guineas a year each. 20 guineas, sir. Or I'd take all the boys together upon an average right through, and say £100 a year for the lot." "Oh," said the gentleman, glancing at the card. "You are the Mr. Squeers mentioned here, I presume?" "Yes, I am, sir," replied the worthy pedagogue. "Mr. Wackford Squeers is my name, and I'm very far from being ashamed of it. These are some of my boys, sir. That's one of my assistants, sir, Mr. Nickleby, a gentleman's son, and a good scholar, mathematical, classical, and commercial. We don't do things by halves at our shop. All manner of learning my boys take down, sir. The expense is never thought of, and they get paternal treatment and washing in." "Upon my word," said the gentleman, glancing at Nicholas with a half smile, and a more than half expression of surprise, "these are advantages indeed." "You may say that, sir," rejoined Squeers, thrusting his hands into his greatcoat pockets. "The most unexceptionable references are given and required. I wouldn't take a reference with any boy that wasn't responsible for the payment of £5 a quarter. No, not if you went down on your knees and asked me, with the tears running down your face, to do it." "Highly considerate," said the passenger. "It's my great aim and end to be considerate, sir," rejoined Squeers. "Snawley junior, if you don't leave off chattering your teeth and shaking with the cold, I'll warm you with a severe thrashing in about half a minute's time." "Sit fast here, gentlemen," said the guard as he clambered up. "All right behind there, Dick," cried the coachman. "All right," was the reply. "Off she goes." And off she did go, if coaches be feminine, amidst a loud flourish from the guard's horn, and the calm approval of all the judges of coaches and coach horses congregated at the Peacock, but more especially of the helpers, who stood with the cloths over their arms, watching the coach till it disappeared, and then lounged admiringly stablewards, bestowing various gruff encomiums on the beauty of the turnout. When the guard, who was a stout old Yorkshireman, had blown himself quite out of breath, He put the horn into a little tunnel